Hey there, Mr. Chu here, trying to help you understand algebra. So you just spell my name just like it sounds, Mr. C-H-E-W. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at YouTube at Mr.KeithEChew. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Mr. Keith E. Chew. There's no dot in that one. We're going to talk about lesson 202B, and that's just a way that I organize my lessons. It's solving one-step equations, SBS. And SBS is a big deal whenever I'm teaching a math class to someone because it means step by step, which means I want you to show every step. So I had an introductory lesson where I explained how to do these and what each thing was called. Each step was called, how you write down justification of the steps. And at the end of the video, there will be a link up here to that original lesson where I go a little bit slower. Down here will be a playlist at the end that gives you all of the Unit 2 lessons that have been videotaped up to this point. So we had student practice problems at the end, and there were two of them. M minus 4 equals negative 6, and 12 equals P plus 16. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a good chance that many of the students watching this already know the answers. But knowing the answers and then showing it step by step is two different issues. So, let's go ahead and solve these and justify each step, which will get you ready for that next jump up class, which is geometry, whenever you're doing algebraic proofs. All right, so when I look at this, in your mind, a lot of people say, I know what the answer is. But there are some of you who have problems with negatives and you don't know the answer. So let's just solve it and justify each step. So anytime you're solving a one-step equation, you ask in your mind, what's happening to the m? The m is having 4 subtracted from it, right? So I need to undo that with an inverse operation. And to undo subtraction, you do the opposite. The opposite of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 4 to the left. So I have to add 4 to the right because an equation has to balance out. So if I add 4 on this side, I have to add 4 on this side, which is what I did. That is your first step and the only step in a one-step equation. So I would always teach my pre-algebra students when I was teaching them in middle school, what happens when I take minus 4 and add 4 to it? I get 0, don't I? And I would just say, well, that's gone. It's gone. So it's going to be m minus 0. Well, m minus 0 is m. And then negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. Now, if you looked at that and you said, I know the answer is negative 2, then you understand your negatives. And that's great. I'm glad you do. Now, after we have the answer here, we have to check it. All right. So the check means that I have to write down the original equation. After I write down the original equation, I'm going to substitute the value that I have for m into m in parentheses. It's the way I've done all of my lessons I've been posting. Only now when you substitute, you put a question mark here. Why? Because we don't know if it's true, and if it is true, it means that we are correct. Negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. And negative 6 equals negative 6, so it did check. Now, when we say step by step, if we ask you to justify it, this is my original equation. This is called the addition property of equality. That's what it's called. I simplified it to get my answer here. This is my original, so I'm going to check it now. I substitute. It's a substitution property of equality. That's the way I write it. Just like I did the addition property of equality here. And then I'm going to do the order of operations. And then after I do the order of operations, I simplify it. And it is checked. All right? So that is all of the steps and the checking. And then the only other thing you could do would be to graph it if it asks. We're graphing m's. We're looking at the number -2. And we know that that is the only value that works. So I put a dot right there on the -2. So that's completely solving it step by step. So you can always pause it if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and erase it because I always try to do my problems within a 10-minute window. Okay, so 12 equals P plus 16. I'm going to write it over here a little bit farther. All right, so what's happening to my P in example B? We're adding 16 to it. I don't want that. So we do the opposite of that. So the opposite of adding 16 is the inverse operation. It's subtracting 16. So if I subtract 16 from the left, I have to subtract 16 from the right so that the equation is still equal on both sides. What would I tell those young students of mine in middle school? This crosses out because plus 16 minus 16 is 0. So I've got a 0 here. P plus 0 is P. And some teachers will want you to write P plus 0 and tell what that step is. But we haven't talked a lot about each individual step. And so I will not do that. And 12 minus 16 is -4. If you didn't know that, you need to work on your negative values. All right, so now I'm going to take and move my graphing step up. So if I want to graph that, I'm graphing P's, and I'm looking at the number -4. Does -4 work? Yes, it's the only number, and that is the graph of it. All right, so if we want to go back and justify, what was this step called? What did we do? We subtracted, so this is the subtraction property of equality. That was that first step. Then we simplified. And then here we graphed. Now what do? We check it to make sure that it is correct. So when we check that, how do you do it? You write the original equation. And then wherever the P is, and with a question mark up above there, I put parentheses where the P is and substitute that value in. And then -4 plus 16 is 12. It checked. So when I write down all the steps over here, this is a substitution property of equality. Then I use the order of operations. And this is simple, but it gets a little bit harder when you're doing two-step equations. And then I simplify it, and it does check. So this is all the steps that are required in a step-by-step equation. All right, I'm going to be under my 10 minutes, which is what I want. I am Mr. Chu. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can see more. Make sure you follow me on TikTok and Instagram. I named this after my 12-year-old peekapoo by the name of Bear. Sometimes you'll hear him, sometimes you'll see him. Join us and we'll learn algebra together. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.